як завжди, перед початком позначте у чат-боксі, чи ви чуєте мене, чи у вас є на екрані картинка, слайди, і напишіть, звідки ви. Київ. Так, все чудово, чутно, прекрасно, це не може не тішити. У нас Черкаси до нас під'єднуються, Харків, Біла Церква, Львівська область, Кривий Ріг, Біла Церква. Чудово, дуже рада вас всіх бачити. Не знаю, чи ви були вчора, чи ви тільки сьогодні до нас приєднуєтеся. У нас сьогодні другий день, ви пам'ятаєте, і ви зараз на слайді бачите програму нашого сьогоднішнього дня. Рада всіх вітати. У нас буквально 2 хвилинки залишилося до початку нашого заходу. Так, чудово, Київ, Асканія Нова, Львів, Марганець до нас приєднується. В Києві сьогодні, як і вчора, дуже спекотно і сонячно. Кропивницький, Луганськ, знову Харків. My pleasure to see and hear you too. Добре, буквально 1 хвилинка залишається до того, як ми розпочнемо наш другий день онлайн-конференції. Нагадаю, сьогодні ми говоримо про підлітків та про підготовку до іспитів. У нас сьогодні буде 2 спікера, 2 гостя. З обома з них, якщо ви брали участь у наших заходах, з обома з них ви знайомі. Це пані Кароліна і пан Яцек. Вони навесні проводили для нас дуже цікаві і корисні вебінари. Отже, 15:00 я готова розпочати і дуже швидко нагадаю вам, що відбувалося вчора, що підготував Макміллан, і потім одразу передам слово нашому першому спікеру. Нагадую, що ми, як Macmillan Education, провели опитування ще на початку червня, виявили ті сфери, де вчителі потребують максимальної допомоги, і розробили дорожню карту. В дорожній карті як елемент є готовність нас, як команди Macmillan, до будь-якого сценарію розвитку подій. Тобто нас не лякає, чи будемо ми знову раптово навчатися онлайн, чи буде це якийсь гібридний варіант. У нас є абсолютно все для того, щоб і учні, і вчителі почувалися себе комфортно та впевнено. Нагадаю, у нас є і паперові підручники, і робочі зошити, і електронні, і інтерактивні цифрові, і онлайн-практика, і онлайн-робочі зошити, які все перевіряють автоматично. У вчителя є інтерактивний підручник з збудованими інструментами для роботи в на онлайн-уроках. У вчителя також є онлайн-практика або онлайн-воркбук, залежно від того, який це підручник. Є генератор тестів і є ресурсні центри вчителя з величезною кількістю вже готових розроблених уроків. Нагадаю, що вчителі одностайні в тому, що наші підручники є teacher-friendly і learner-friendly, і відмічають ті ключові моменти, завдяки яким можна назвати їх teacher-friendly і learner-friendly. Це легкість у плануванні і, що, на нашу думку, є найважливішим, дуже мало часу витрачають вчителі для того, щоб підготуватися до уроку, як у класі, так і онлайн-уроку, адже все є у готовому вигляді. У нас є онлайн-платформа, на якій, власне, і знаходяться цифрові ресурси. Ця платформа має назву Macmillan Education Everywhere. Всі підручники, всі ресурси до підручників знаходяться на відстані 1 кліку мишею. Ці ресурси активуються для вчителя за кодом в книзі для вчителя, для учня за кодом в підручнику для учня. Ці коди є унікальними, цей ресурс неможливо скопіювати, тому ми завжди закликаємо усіх, і в першу чергу батьків, учнів, все ж таки купувати оригінальні версії, не позбавляючи своїх дітей всього того багатства, яке пропонують наші підручники. І нагадаю, що ми, як представництво в Україні, надаємо всебічну підтримку вчителям, учням та їхнім батькам. У нас для вчителів є готове календарно-тематичне планування. Ми проводимо величезну кількість вебінарів, і все це є безкоштовним. Ми проводимо локально для певних районів або певних областей зумінари, тобто зустрічі через Zoom. Проводимо консультації в будь-якому зручному для вчителів форматі. Це може бути як очна консультація, так і зустріч у Zoom, це може бути зустріч по телефону, у Viber, у месенджері, тобто так, як вам зручніше. До всіх наших ресурсів є записані відеоінструкції, вони знаходяться на нашому сайті macmillan.ukraine.com і на нашому каналі в YouTube. І у нас є відеоуроки, які розміщені на каналі в YouTube, які ви можете подивитися і взяти певні ідеї для своїх власних уроків. Нагадаю, де знаходиться календарно-тематичне планування, це сайт macmillan.ukraine.com, розділ викладачам, або на цьому ж сайті в каталозі на вкладці з підручником. І я із задоволенням передаю слово пані Кароліні. Кароліна, the floor is yours, and Karolina is going to tell you very interesting and absolutely useful ideas, things about flipping your classroom, right?
Yes, among other things.
Thank you, Karolina.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Okay. Perhaps without much further ado, let us start. And let me start perhaps with explaining what is hidden behind this title. I'm pretty sure that you have read my abstract for this session. Let me briefly explain what I mean here and what you can expect within the next 60 minutes. So we've got a session entitled New School Reality, What Flip and What Not to Flip to Design Lessons Smartly. So to begin with, I am going to talk entirely about new school reality. We are all keeping our fingers crossed to go back to regular schools as soon as possible. I'm not sure on what where is your where is your government on that one right now? Are you guys allowed to go to start regular classes from the very beginning of the school year? If you could just type anything. Oh, yes. Are you? Hello. Okay. Yes. According to zones. Okay. But most of you. Okay. So we start online. Okay. So Okay. This is interesting because hopefully everyone will find something for themselves in this session, even if you're extremely lucky to start, regular school very soon, because now we all know how much we missed that within the last semester. Well, like I said, I don't want to, predict the bad things here, but if anything happens and we need to stay home again, hopefully you will make use of this webinar as well. But I think that you are really lucky to be doing that. However, like I said, I am going to talk about new school reality. So what happens if we are if we are not allowed to go to schools anymore or for a certain period of time? Okay, then. So here is what I'm going to talk about. Perhaps one more before I start for good. One more piece of information or one piece of explanation. Now, the term for what we are talking about here is called distance learning, right? Going online, having classes online, teaching students through computers. This is called distance learning. However, what I'm going to talk about today here is here it is, it's distant teaching. Okay, so one thing that I'd like to underline at this point is the following. I'm not going to focus on the learner not straightforwardly, not directly, okay? I'm not going to talk about how to develop learners' skills. I'm not going to talk about how to help students score more points during the exam. I'm not going to talk about how students can generally progress. I'm not going to talk about the techniques for helping students to progress. I am going to talk about how things or techniques which can help the teacher make their online life or learning teaching easier. Okay, so this is my main point for today. I'm going to share with you my ideas about, I know that learning is important. I know that at the end of the day, this is our main goal, to help learners become better speakers, writers, readers, listeners, and whatnot. But today, the entire webinar is from the point of view of teaching, designing classes, kind of getting by or surviving this very extremely difficult situation, which I believe it is for all of us. Okay, so when it comes to distance learning or distance teaching, so one more thing, my agenda for today. First, I'm going to have a short introduction. The introduction will be mainly based on and here's maybe a short digression. I did not have a chance to teach online last semester because things have changed for me recently. I moved to Bucharest, and I don't really teach right now. Right. However, as a director of studies, I was working with my school and my group of teachers, and the introduction to this webinar will be based on what I've noticed while I was working with them. So yes, I am going to talk about the mistakes that they were making in this initial period, because they were making a few mistakes. Okay, then I'm going to talk based on what I noticed, but based on my observations. I came up with some basic principles for distance teaching. Okay, so in other words, what to do and what not to do. And then I'm going to focus on the two scenarios for distance teaching. So what may happen to us? What are the two options for distance learning or distance teaching? And this will be supported with the so-called Guide to Success, which is, I believe, my personal, my gift and my surprise for you, because I've prepared a very, I hope useful, but quite a comprehensive handout that you will receive after this particular webinar. But this is, a cherry on the pie. I'm going to move to it later on, so you need to bear with me for at least another 30 minutes, okay? Okay, so let us start with the short introduction. Distance learning. This is the picture that I wanted to start with a visual, and this is what came up. When I googled it. So basically, this is what we all thought distance learning would be. Unfortunately, this is where we all ended up, I'm afraid, especially at the very beginning. Okay, we ended up frustrated. We ended up completely lost for either materials or ideas how to handle, because let's face it, most teachers when it comes to school reality, the supervisors, the Ministry of Education, the principals, we were left completely unattended. Okay, nobody helped us. Like, okay, we start online teaching now, right? And I believe that nobody helped us, and I believe that due to that, we went through some tough beginnings. Okay, I'm not sure what it looked like over at your end of the world, that is in Ukraine. In Poland, it all started with just 2 weeks off, right? Because everybody was hoping that the virus would be gone by then. And then suddenly, okay, we can't go back to school. We need to do some online teaching. And the online teaching started just like that, without any materials, without any preparation, without really any anything, any support, okay? So I believe, and this is what I've noticed, like I said, with my group of teachers, the teachers that I kind of supervise in the school where I work, that yes, they were going through some tough beginnings. Before they, as you can see in this picture, in this photograph, before they got strong and apt at doing online lessons or kind of doing online courses in general, I would say that most of them were rather weak and at times lame and completely, like this sport amateur that you can see in the photograph. Okay, what about those tough beginnings? What were, the way I see it, the biggest problems? First of all, the thing that I've noticed was that teachers started off with sending way too many extra worksheets. Okay, so like I said, I was talking about, this is my observation, like as I said, as a director of studies, but also as a parent. Okay, as a parent, my friends, my son's education is slightly different, but my friends were calling me saying, how come is it possible that my children get so many worksheets to be done only from the English class? Okay, and this was what I believe one of our tough beginnings, right? Too many extra worksheets. For some reason, being left, like I said, unattended, without any support, a number of teachers thought, okay, I need to, and here comes the question, what, design a new course? Definitely not, right? There is no need to send students to create new worksheets, to design new activities, to look online for different texts and activities, and which leads me to my next tough beginning point, too much reliance on online resources. Okay, so this is what we all started with. Okay, so I have to run a lesson online. So what do? I go online to look for some resources and materials and extra worksheets. And now just imagine a text with a number of materials, a number of activities to it, or some listening, or some, I don't know, worksheet comparing two grammatical tenses. Okay, and this is only English. The way I see it, students were receiving similar worksheets from geography teacher, history teacher, mother tongue teacher, maths teacher, and so on. Okay, so for some reason we thought that, okay, online teaching means looking for materials online. The way I see it, though, and it's my third point in the tough beginnings, students started relying too little on course book. You've got a perfect resource at home. Your students have got a perfect resource at home, a perfect teaching material, which is the course book. Okay, this is something that was designed, written by a professional, supervised by an editor. You have it. Okay, it's just we need to use this course book wisely and smartly in online education and in online lesson, and this is something that I'm going to talk about today. So as a counteract to this, right, we know what the problems were at the beginning. I came up with a few basic things that the first things that came to my mind when I started talking to my group of teachers. So first of all, stick to the course book. You don't need lots of extra worksheets. You don't need that. Like I said, you've got a perfect teaching tool, which is your book, your student's book, your workbook. You've got plenty of ideas in the teacher's book, which is something that I'm going to talk about in a moment. Okay, so this is point number one. Point number two, point number two is the following. We need to be selective. There's absolutely no way that it's absolutely impossible to do every task that is in the course book in online education. What is more, there is no need to do so. Okay? We don't have to. What is more, we shouldn't even attempt at doing every single task in the course book and in the workbook during online teaching. Let me give you an example. Let's say there are we've got a vocabulary lesson, in the student's book. There are 7 activities. Some of them vocabulary presentation, some of them vocabulary practice. There's always some kind of controlled practice, free practice, some speaking, maybe a short text, maybe some listening. And there are 7 activities like this in the student book and another 5 in the workbook. There is absolutely no way students can do all of that. Okay, let's say in the regular classroom, you would probably do some, 5, maybe 6 from the student's book and give students another 3 as homework. Now, what happens is that whatever you ask students to do, it is homework. Okay, if you tell students, okay, so now do page 3 from the student's book and do page 1 from the workbook, they are showered with schoolwork and they have to do it at home. And this is super daunting. This is very, very difficult to cope with. Okay, therefore we need to be selective. There are some principles that we can follow when it comes to that selection. So in other words, so what is it that I choose? Okay, which I'm going to address in a moment. And then let's say we stick to the course book, we pick and choose what is important. And if you really want to do something more, then add something simple. Not an extra worksheets with 5 different activities on it. Not an extra text, not an extra, not an extra vocabulary set, right, for students to learn. Because, like I said, this is a very difficult situation for students. I would say, like from the psychological point of view, it is one of the most difficult things that they are going through. They will ever go through, in my mind. Okay, being left alone, being made to study alone at home, do all the schoolwork through self-study. Okay, so if you must add something short, nice and simple. Let me show you what it is. Example number, there are 2 things you can add. Okay, one is something that you design yourself, and I'm going to show you examples like that. And there are also things that there are very nice activities that you can look for, that you can find in the teacher's book, especially if you work with Gateway, because those of you who do work with the book, you will easily recognize those tags, extra activity, and this is something nice and simple to be attached to the course of the lesson. There are 2 possibilities here. You can either, you might look for tasks which you send to students as instruction for self-study, kind of offline. For example, extra activity. Ask students to write the names of 3 famous people who annoy them and say why using vocabulary from the first lesson and the adverbs of frequency. Gateway B1+, that's exactly where it's taken from, right? You don't need to look half an hour for some extra resources for adverbs of frequency. It's enough to open the teacher's book and find something short, something requiring no preparation, and something actually engaging for the learner. Okay. Another possibility is something that you can do during online lesson. Another extra activity from the teacher's book: hold a team competition. I know that you can't really put students into teams, but if you've got all of them, in one on your computer screen, you can say, and you know the names of the learners, you can easily say who belongs to which team, and which will be, I believe, very nice for students because they have double. Okay, it's like this is extra. This requires extra thinking to remember who I am with, because I'm not physically in that group in the classroom. But that was just a digression. So the extra activity would be the following: hold a team competition, divide the class into 2 teams, and read out the definitions of words from the text. As soon as someone knows which word you're explaining, they call out the word and they get a point, and it's done. Another, it's true, but the parents pay and they check their teacher. Perhaps I'll have time to refer to this one in a moment. So if you just repeat it perhaps at the end, I hope I will have a chance to, like I said, go back to this one. Or you may also send the following to students if it's for offline self-study instruction. Alternatively, ask students to write 5 tips For tourists, using public transport in your own town or city. Okay, something short and simple. These are activities from the teacher's book. Now let me show you some activities for online work, which you will find in the guide that I have prepared for you, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So, for instance, revise phrases and vocabulary from the previous lesson. In order to do so, you might first ask students to write 4 or 5 items they remember and in the chat box, and this is it. Right? It's just something extra. Show students a photo which you prepared before the lesson and ask them to write a mini dialogue based on this particular photo using the target vocabulary. Or something extremely simple like show students 3 to 4 sentences in L1 and ask for translation. So see, you don't need loads of work. You don't need lots of extra activities, lots of extra worksheets. You just, if you really want to add something short, nice and simple. Okay, then. So this was my introduction. Let me move on now to my second point. And this is the list of basic principles for distance learning. And here they are. Principle number 1. Something that I've already mentioned. Not every task needs to be done. You don't need to do every single activity in the book. There's no chance you might really do it in distance learning or distance teaching. So don't try, because if you try, you only get frustrated and your students will get just as frustrated because the workload for them will be huge. Okay. Another important, so the question is, how do I choose what to do and what not to do? Okay. In other words, set lesson goals. Before you start the lesson, and this is extremely important, if we don't want to shower students with too much work, ask yourself, what is it that I really want my students to do? If I were to choose only 2 activities from this particular lesson, what are they? What is the most important thing that I want my students to do from this particular page in the course book? And in order to ask that question successfully and well, I would say, follow your students' needs. Your biggest asset, this is what you can see in the green now, and this is something that I keep repeating as a teacher trainer, as a teacher, your biggest asset is the fact that you know your students. You are the ones who know if your students struggle with gap completion activities, or maybe they struggle with speaking activities, or maybe they don't really struggle anything. They need something extra challenging, okay? So then you focus only those which are really difficult. Or maybe you're dealing with a weak group of students. They then choose 2 or 3, which are the simplest ones, the easiest ones to do, okay? One thing is that I'd like to say here, but something that I'm well aware of, something that I should mention is that I know that this does not apply to first graders. And I know how difficult this situation will be for you. But to be honest, I would probably have to run a separate webinar of how to diagnose, how to run diagnostic testing at the beginning of the school year. So I don't really have time to do it today, okay? And I know that this here with first graders, it's not going to be, this is you're in for a much more difficult task, a much more difficult job, okay? What I would do is probably make standard choices. So choose what I believe is the standard, is mainstream, okay? This is the advice that I would probably give. Okay then, so what do I mean by that? Let me just show it to you, what I mean by setting the goals and making choices. This is a vocabulary lesson from Gateway, Unit 8, as far as I remember, B1+. So you've got, well, I'm not sure if you, can you see the whole slide? Because I've got this, okay. The first choice that you might make is to ask yourself if you want to, oh, perfect, thank you for that, thanks. The first question that you might ask yourselves is the following: do I want to focus on students on the, is this an activity of vocabulary presentation or vocabulary practice? Because perhaps I know that vocabulary practice is extremely important, and without putting words to work in the context of a sentence, of a text, it will be much more difficult for students to learn them and to remember them. But if we have to make a choice, then perhaps we should choose the activities which present the new vocabulary, because the new vocabulary is so important, and leave practice for some other time, for later, maybe for homework, and then skip workbook altogether, okay? Or perhaps, and here comes another choice, as you can see, there are two vocabulary sets here. One is for art, theater, and music, and then the other one is for artists. Perhaps we might choose only one vocabulary set, okay? Which, this is your call. You know what your students need. Nobody tells you to do every single activity from that page. You decide whether you want to focus maybe either presentation or practice, or maybe you will choose only one vocabulary set. And there's nothing wrong with it. Why? Because, okay, it's not perfect, but let's face it, distant learning as a situation is far from perfect anyway, okay? We need, in other words, I know that this is not ideal, but we found ourselves in a very difficult situation, and we need some expedient measures to survive and to make this whole thing doable. And this is it. This is one of those expedient measures. If you've got two vocabulary sets, perhaps it would be a good idea to choose only one for students to study. Okay, I guess I need to speed up now, because somehow I feel I'm already running. I know I still have half an hour, but I've got lots of things to show. Okay, so another principle of distance teaching is homework is not obligatory. This point is done for a situation in which you have online lessons, okay? You've got online lessons and then homework. Now, assuming that the online lesson is still homework, do we really want our students to spend some more time in front of the computers and in front of and at their desks? Okay, so homework is not always obligatory, because in fact the lesson is already resembles homework anyway. Okay, another example, another important principle for distance teaching will be the following: students' surroundings boost creativity, and creativity is always a perfect way to put the language into context and to put the words and the grammar structures to work. So, for example, and again, instead of searching online resources, different websites for extra worksheets, for extra activities, perhaps we might send to students the following instruction: take a photo of something in your surroundings, your room, your parents, your house, or personal items, and write 4 to 5 sentences about this photo with the grammar structure from the lesson. And this is it. Short, simple, requires very little preparation, and it makes students, this is a strange situation because students have the lesson online. And I know that if not all of them, then most of them respond very good to being allowed to do something with it. Look around instead of just looking at some presentation and doing online activities and focusing on the screen. So now the teacher says, okay, so now stand up, look around, find something interesting. I would say that students react very positively to that, okay? The next one, assessment is in successful distance teaching. I would say that assessment is learner-friendly. So assessment in a way should go beyond regular tests and quizzes. In the guide that I have prepared for you, you will find some ideas for assessment, which doesn't say, okay, this is time to do the quiz, this is time to give students a test. No, this is something like, okay, which of the activities from the last lesson do you consider the most interesting? Take a photo of it and send it to me. I mean, of a completed task. This might be a very nice example of learner-friendly assessment. Another, and this is, as far as I know, last but one, acknowledging what students want. This is a difficult situation. Like I said, there is a lot of self-study. So if we've got so much self-study, let students self-decide. Like here, language checkpoint, so unit revision. students have several activities based on grammar, students have a few activities based on vocabulary from the unit. And why not asking students, sending the following instructions? Do 3 tasks of your choice. Choose 3 and do them. And it is up to you. Acknowledging what students want. Okay, if you want to make sure that students combine both grammar and vocabulary activities, you might say, do 3 activities, make sure to include something from grammar and something from vocabulary section. Okay, so this is the way we can, okay, normally in the classroom, you're not able to do that. You can't really say, so now guys, choose whichever activity you want. But in online learning, which is mainly based on individual study, plus I would say that it provides some kind of novelty. This is something that students, they don't expect it. They're not used to it. So there's always, this provides some kind of nice variation, okay? Especially that, like I said, unfortunately, in the regular classroom, we very rarely ask our students what they want. So I would say that here we've got a perfect example. And last but not least, this is something that I've heard when I went on a meeting for parents that I attended before my son started his distance learning. And one of the psychologists said there, remember that doing a task is not learning. And this is very important. So this kind of summarizes all the other principles here. The fact it really makes no sense to ask students do all 7 or 8 activities from the book, from the course book, because what they will do is just do the task, complete, and tick off, do another. Let's choose 1 or 2, but support this with something extra, like write sentences about yourself, or make a mind map of the new vocabulary in your notebook. Something that makes sure that it's not just ticking off one task after another. Okay then, so these were my principles for distance learning. Let me now show you how it works in reality in our professional lives. There are 2 scenarios for distance learning. They are called, that's the official term, asynchronous and synchronous. Asynchronous basically means that there are no video connections. It means that you don't synchronize. You don't meet in real life, in real time, simultaneously, okay? That's why it's asynchronous. There are no video connections, and you basically send instructions for individual study. The other way of coping with distance learning, and I would say it's not really something for teachers to decide. I would say it's the school policy in general. Another way will be synchronous, and that involves real-time lessons, and that those online sessions, let's say once a week, maybe 3 times a week, are followed usually by some individual work. So not really homework, because like I said, everything is homework, but there is something extra. Let's face it, you're not. First, the question is, if an online lesson is 45 minutes, that's pretty long. Even if it's 45 minutes, you won't. 45 minutes online is not the same as 45 minutes, face to face. You won't be able to do anything. So there's always something extra to be done outside the classroom, especially, and that's my. Perhaps I should have included it here, black and white. If I were to recommend something, I would shorten the real-time lessons to 20 to 25 minute slots, okay? Because students spend their time in front of the computers. This definitely deteriorates their vision. They don't move around. I would, if I could decide for myself, I would probably shorten the lessons to 20-25 minute slots and then leave something for self-study. Especially that, and I'm going to talk about it in a moment, it really makes no sense for real-time lessons to be supervision of students doing their tasks in the course book, in the book or in the notebook. I'm going to talk about it. They say it's better 25-30 minutes long. That's why I say 20-25. It depends on how you divide the material. Okay then, let me now focus on the first one. So what happens once you do this is what I wanted to ask you. Could you please, let me go back. Could you please write A if you work in the asynchronous way, and S if you write in the synchronous way with your students, or you worked in the previous semester? A? Okay. If I get more answers, right, it depends. A plus, okay. Oh, both. So I can definitely see there is no rule here. Okay, there is no rule. Okay. So hopefully you will use you will find both of these explanations useful. Let us start with the asynchronous learning. Now, very few important things about how to go about it. Something that I believe is very important in asynchronous learning. First of all, and this is just a repetition. First of all, pick and choose. There's no way we can do all of it. We need to choose wisely and smartly. How do we choose? We focus on the core. We choose the tasks that are obligatory, that are the most important, obviously depending on what kind of students you are dealing with, what kind of class you are teaching, and so on. And basically, the asynchronous learning or teaching is all about helping students navigate through the course book material. So what we need to do is send them instructions clear enough so that students can do everything on their own. For instance, how do we do that? Again, Unit 1, vocabulary lesson, right? We've got two vocabulary sets, so we need to make some kind of decision what to do and what not to do. So we need to prioritize. Do we focus? Do we tell students in some kind of instructions to do either vocabulary presentation activities and skipping vocabulary practice, or perhaps we choose only one vocabulary set and do both presentation and practice. In this particular one, which I believe is pretty important, and you can't really get rid of one or another, I would probably focus on on vocabulary presentation and leave doing the task. Leave the practice for some other. Doing a task. So don't instead of saying do activities 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on page 3, right? And in order to do just that, we might include an element of choice. And if at this point you are wondering how to do it in the first place, the good news is that I have done it for you. So what you will receive at the end, and here's the guide that I have prepared for you. I have created a gateway guide for distance learning with two options. The first option, and that's the one that we are talking about right now, is asynchronous learning. That means that what you will find there are particular instructions for students for every single lesson. How does it work? How is it possible in the first place? If you're using Gateway, you will know at this point, or you will easily recall that every unit has exactly the same layout. So lesson 1, vocabulary, lesson 2, reading, grammar and context, then lesson 4, developing vocabulary, lesson 5, Gateway, and so on and so forth. And therefore, because every single unit has got the same composition, it was easy for me to come up with the so-called generic instructions for the learner. Let me show you what it looks like. There it is. Lesson 1, vocabulary, okay? First of all, I thought about, I've got for you, there's the lesson aim, to introduce new vocabulary, because this is the lesson aim. And I thought about obligatory tasks, okay? And I took the liberty of choosing it for you. All the tasks from the student's book, introducing new vocabulary, not necessarily practicing through speaking, writing, or in context, but introducing. And now what happens is the following, and this is in the Word document, so you can easily adjust it, change it, modify it, and so on. This table, it starts from here. This thing here is ready-made instructions for the student. It says to you as the teacher, send the following instruction to your students Remember to complete the pages and the numbers of tasks. So, what you need to prepare before the lesson. This is instructions for the learner. What you need to prepare before lesson is student's book, workbook, and your notebook. What do I do and where to find it? So what do I do? This is the instruction that the learner receives. Look at the photos on page something, and all the red lines is something for you to complete. Look at the photos on page something. Can you name at least 5 items you can see in the pictures? And that's in the student's book. Do tasks this, and that on page something. Create a mind map of the new words, or write the new words in the notebook, in your notebook. Where do I find it? In the notebook, like what I need to do this particular task. Number 4, do the listening activity in lesson 1 vocabulary. There is always a listening activity. And I believe that students have always problems with listening. Hence, I included here as one of the tasks to be done. And number 3, do 3 tasks of your choice from the workbook. And this is something that if you work with Gateway in an asynchronous way, you copy that, you put it into students' email, and it's done. Okay. So let me show you another example, because this was for vocabulary. Let me now show you lesson 3 grammar. We've got grammar in context. The ones in white. The ones on white field are grammar presentation activities. All the others are grammar practice. Again, important things. There are too many activities to be done, like all of them. It's absolutely impossible. Let's not even try it, because we will be frustrated, and students will be just as frustrated. But we should let students choose and make use of the students' surroundings. So this is one of the basic principles. Again, how do we do that? Well, we might use of the lesson 3 teacher of the Gateway Guide to Teaching. Again, the lesson aim is grammar presentation and practice. Obligatory tasks. Mind you that this is always this. You're going to receive it in a Word document, so it's editable. Right? You can easily edit, change it, add something, delete. This is up to you. This is just the core that, I'm proposing. So you need to. I'd like to clarify that. The obligatory tasks are grammar presentation activity from student's book and grammar reference. So they need to read something on their own from the end of the book. 1 practice task from student book and 1 practice task from workbook, and this is it. Again, you send the following instructions. What to prepare before the lesson. What do I do and where do I find it? Do tasks. I've noticed 1 something, and 1 something, because this is always the grammar presentation activity. Then go to grammar reference on page something. Do task something on page this and that. If necessary, go to grammar reference on page again. And so this is and finally do 3 types of your choice at the end. And now, idea for assessment, and it's just an idea of assessment. There is no need to give students, or how shall I, quizzes and tests. This is my idea for assessment. Take a photo of something in your surroundings. We've already said that. Yes. Write 4 to 5 sentences about this photo with the grammar structure from the lesson. Send the sentences to me by, Friday, September the 14th at the latest. Mind you that this is always a red line, something that you complete. I just need to have a look. Okay, I need to speed up. Okay, and the same goes for developing speaking. Again, another lesson. You know what it looks like. I need to speed up a little bit, so I'm going to close. I just want to show you that you will find similar instructions to every single lesson. Remembering that we need to adding something, that we add something simple and making assessment learner friendly. So bearing this in mind, this is the instructions that I've presented to you. Again, read the phrases in the, not only, right, going beyond just doing 1 task after another. For instance, read the phrases in the speaking bank, choose 3 and write sentences with them. For instance, okay, this is what is missing here, sorry, notebook. But luckily, this is editable, this is Word, so you might easily do it on your own. An idea for assessment, write a dialogue using at least 3 phrases from the speaking bank and send it to me by the date at the latest. Okay, so this is basically what asynchronous learning was all about, and the instructions that you might send to the learner. Now, the synchronous learning. Here, and again, there will be another guide to it with an online lesson scenario. What is important here? How to go about it if we combine online sessions with some individual or self-study instructions. Definitely, one thing that I would suggest we avoid is online supervision of task completion. If you have 45-minute lessons, and we might devote the last part of that lesson to such task completion anyway. But the way I see it is that online lessons should be focused on collaboration, interaction, communication, and this is a perfect moment to flip tasks. Now, what is flipped classroom? I'm pretty sure that you must have heard this term before. Flipped classroom basically means that what we normally do in the classroom, this is something done through self-study before the lesson. Let me show you this. The question is why we do it and how it works. And the explanation that I have for you is by Russell Stannard, which I believe is very convincing, and it explains quite a lot. Stannard refers to Bloom's taxonomy of high order and low order thinking skills. Basically, low order thinking skills are the ones that do not really engage you much, or they do not require much processing. You can't say that they are boring, but they are rather simple, manipulative, nothing more than that. Higher order thinking skills are include those activities which actually make you think, analyze, create something new, evaluate, compare, and so on. Okay, and normally, if you think about the regular classroom, or regular learning, traditional learning, usually remembering, understanding is done in the classroom. It means that a history teacher gives you a lecture on what happened in the 1920, or how the Second World War came about, and then you have to go home and write an essay, and this is create or evaluate, talk about the reasons, how it affected people, and so on. Okay, so first there is remembering, understanding, dates, and hots and lots. Exactly, someone wrote it here, right? And then this is done at home. The idea of flipped classroom is to flip it. First, you can do something, you can read the dates at home, right? You can read something about the Second World War, the beginnings of the World War at home. But when you come to the classroom, let's discuss it together. Let's analyze, let's compare, let's do something together. Let's engage all your higher order thinking skills in the classroom, okay? And this will be basically the same idea for the online learning. So understanding and remembering. So checking the meaning of the new words, grammar reference or grammar introduction activities, or before. It should be before. Sorry, now I noticed the spelling mistake. This is something that you can ask students the lesson, and then during the online session we focus on communication, collaboration, and interaction. And again, let me show you how that works in context, right? Look, we've got exactly the same page as I showed you before. Appearance, we've got work with a partner, put these words in the correct column. See, this is a perfect activity for self-study and for self-preparation, right? But if you look at number 3, work with a partner and take turns to describe the people, this is interaction and communication, which should be the focus of a typo. I know. Interaction. I know this is, apparently I have problems with switching R with other letters. I'm sorry about all the typos till the end of this webinar. Okay. So again, let's have a look at number 4. Match the personality adjectives. This is something that can be done, but perhaps listening, number 6, and number 7, which is speaking. This is something that should be done in the classroom during online session. So before I show you the guide again, I'd like to show you an inventory of those before the lesson activities. Okay, what can it be? Very often there can be warm-up tasks from the course book. So task number 1, it usually sets a question. You can give it to students and just tell them to think about it before the lesson. This can be vocabulary and presentation activity. If there's a text in the lesson, you might ask students to read for the first time or listen for the first time, just once, without doing any activities to it. Another possibility, if you want to prepare something, you might take the sentences from the text or from activity and change it into a jumbled sentence activity and send it to students to put it in order. You might even send students the vocabulary list in L1 and ask them to look for English equivalents. If there are any special boxes like comprehension tips, exam tips, phrase banks, this is something that you might ask students, okay, before our next lesson, read the exam tip on page this and that, and think about the answer, possible answer, okay? And now, so this was what you might do before the lesson. Now let me show you how what the gateway guide for synchronous learning looks like. Like I said, this combines online session or a less online lesson with some instructions for self-study. So what you will find in the lesson name is the same, obligatory tasks are the same. One thing that I'd like to clarify at this point. Both in the first option, in the synchronous learning and asynchronous learning, the activities that you find in the tables and here in the lesson scenarios are a lot more than those in the obligatory tasks. Obligatory task is that I wanted to just signal what is the absolute minimum, okay? This, you will find more activities in the table and here in the scenario, but like I said, this one here just underlines what is the absolute minimum, the way I see it, okay? So every lesson starts with online lesson scenario, and it goes like this. Suggestions for the teacher. Greet your students. Ask them to show if they can hear you, see you by putting their hands up, nodding their heads, and so on. Say the instructions in English, for example. If you hear me, put the thumbs up, nod your head, put your arms in the air, point to your left ear, and so on. Mind you, the most important things are interaction, communication, collaboration, and during those online sessions. So begin the lesson with a short warm-up activity. Ask students to finish the sentences. Today I'd like to go, and so on. Draw students' attention to the photos and ask questions. Number 4, ask students if they have done the activity from the student's book assigned for self-study. This is, before the lesson, you assign some self-study. Ask 1 or 2 simple questions about it, like give the words that you remember, say 2 words that you didn't know before. Then you always have something like choose 2 or 3 activities from the student's book that you will do together during online session. Remember to focus on the activities requiring interaction, collaboration, and communication. Then before the lesson, this is number 6, prepare a few photos connected with the subject of the lesson. Show them to the students and ask them to write 2 or 3 sentences describing the photo using the words from the lesson. And the final point is always finish the lesson, remind students about the self-study and the next online session. And after that comes instruction for self-study, which looks similar. Send the following instruction to the students. Before the lesson, you need student's book and workbook. Do task this and that. Do 3 tasks of your choice. Do tasks before the next online session, do the following activities from the student's book. Okay? Mind you that you might modify the number of these. You don't need to do 2 tasks here. Perhaps you don't want students to do any activities from the student's book whatsoever. You only want them to do 3 activities of their choice from workbook. But like I said, this guide is editable, right? This is a Word document. You will receive it as a Word document, okay? Another example, okay, I still have 3 minutes, so I'll show you how this works how this works for another lesson. The next lesson number 2 is reading, okay? So when it comes to the preparation, you have to think about whether you want students to get acquainted with the language or the text. If you want students to, you have at least 15 minutes. Okay, I'm sorry, because I'm rushing like crazy, and I thought I need to finish at 4 o'clock. Okay, so I might slow down. Okay, is that correct? Maybe I'm just missing. I think yes. Okay, perfect. Okay, let me slow down a bit then. Lesson number 2 is reading. You need to ask yourselves a question. Do I want my students to get acquainted with the text or the language before the lesson? So if I want my students to get acquainted with, or maybe just think about the topic. If I want my students to think about the topic, I would ask them to do exercise 1. Work with a partner, obviously not, but there's always a question there. Why do you think these people are special? Look at the photos and think, what are special people? Think about the topic and that's all. You might also ask students to read the text once for meaning and ask them, okay, before the next lesson, read the text and be able to tell me what the text is about in your mother tongue. And that's it, nothing more. But the first read through is done before the lesson. Another possibility, you might give students a list of vocabulary items which students might not know in this text, and ask them to translate them into their mother tongue, into L1. So this is entirely up to you. Another thing that I would focus on during the online session is the critical thinking box. It says here, geniuses are born, not made. Do you agree with it? What does it mean? What does the text say about it? Like I said, why? Because the focus on the online session should be communication, interaction, and collaboration. Another thing that I would definitely focus on, if not in preparation, but you might ask students, okay, starting. I'm talking too much and too fast. So, okay, focus on exam. 2 possibilities here. Either this is something you focus during the exam, during the online session, okay, and you encourage discussion even if it's L1, even in students' mother tongue, or you ask students to do it before the lesson as a flipped kind of activity. Read the text, read the exam success, and answer the question, okay, in your mother tongue. And this is what you will find in the lesson scenario. Look, before the next online lesson, and this is something that you will find there, read the text on page something, be able to say what it is about in L1, okay? Then, lesson number 2, you will find reading. You've got the lesson aim, you've got the obligatory task, so the absolute minimum is for students to read the text and do 1 comprehension task. This is the absolute minimum. However, like I said, if you look at the online scenario and the instructions for self-study, there are definitely more. Let us have a look at what it looks like. Again, greet the students, have a short small talk, say or write in the chat box 2 or 3 sentences about yourself, that is you, the teacher, using the vocabulary from the previous lesson. Ask students to create similar sentences and write them in the chat box or in the notebook, which they can, like this, show to the camera. The reason for including such activities is that you need some kind of bonding, right? The online session gives you that teaching is very much based on relations. You basically learn more for the teachers that you like, okay? And with activities like that, very simple, you show your human face, you make this whole learning experience more personal, okay? Choose 2 or 3. Check the activity from the reading lesson you have assigned for self-study. There is always a point like this. Choose 2 or 3 activities, then add something to finish, something to round up. Like at the end of the lesson, ask students to point to 1 piece of information from the text which they consider the most interesting, surprising, strange, and so on. And the final will be finish the lesson. And obviously, this is followed by instructions for self-study. So send the following instructions to the learner. You need the workbook, read the text on page, and do task something and something from the workbook. There is idea for assessment, such as this one. Look, take a photo of 2 activities that you have completed and send it to me, the photo, right? By next Friday at the latest. And before the next classroom, and this is something that I'd like to focus on, is the following. Watch the flipped classroom video do task this and that, or read grammar reference on page something. Why? Because the next lesson in the row is grammar in context. And if you're using Gateway, you will probably know the flipped classroom videos, which is nothing else but a grammar presentation video, which is absolutely perfect for a flipped activity, right? Instead of, it is a lot more interesting for any learner to watch a short video than to read grammar reference or grammar presentation or grammar table, okay? So before the lesson, you ask students to watch the grammar part. You might ask them to do this grammar presentation activity, and it's also important to include student surroundings, engage students in interaction, and obviously focus on exam if there is a kind of exam tip. And again, the guide for this particular lesson looks the following. Grammar in context, we've got lesson A is grammar presentation and practice. Obligatory task is grammar presentation activity from student's book, grammar reference, to read one task from student's book, one task from workbook. But like I said, again, this is the absolute minimum. We've got the online lesson scenario, and then includes such things as revised structures from the previous grammar lesson. Because this is grammar lesson 7. There in every unit there are 2 grammar in context lessons. So this is the second one. Hence, point number 2 calls for a short revision. Number 3, ask students how well they understood the grammar explanation they were supposed to read before the lesson, read or watch. Yeah. Choose 2 or 3 activities. And number 5, ask students to write 2 sentences with the new structure about their lives, hobbies, families, which they would like other students to know. So, like, this is a variation of the of this kind of activity in which you say, okay, which 2 pieces of information you would like to share with your colleagues. Okay, this is it. When they are ready, ask individual students to read the sentences aloud. Another activity which you will find here at some point is, for example, write 2 sentences using the target structure, one being true and one being false. And then when students are ready, they read it aloud. And the rest of the class can guess if the sentences are true or false. And this is it: collaboration, interaction, and communication. And obviously, this is followed by instructions for self-study. What do I do? Where do I find it? And what do I do just before the next lesson? Okay, then. I believe we've reached the end, the final slide. I hope that you will find it useful. I would like to, just to recap very shortly, we talked about 2 options for distance learning. We started with the basic principles and the 2 options for distance learning. Hopefully I managed to show you how these principles are applicable to these 2 options, right? How to, make use of student surroundings, how to include an element of choice, how to pick and choose, and so on. And these 2, what you can see, the 2 small pictures below, the Gateway Guide for Distance Learning is something I believe my colleagues from Macmillan will send to you very shortly, okay? So I guess that at this point, it's time for me to wish you good luck, and I'll keep my fingers crossed for the regular school activities and classroom activities and lessons to go on as long as possible, because unfortunately, somehow I believe that even if we start in the schools, the time will come with the second surge in which you will need to make use of what I've just said. Hopefully, however, this guide will be useful. From my perspective, I can say that it was very much appreciated. I did something similar to different course books for Polish teachers, and it was very much appreciated. So I'm really hoping that you will find it useful as well.
Thank you very much, Karolina. I do confirm that every participant will receive the guide you designed, and I do believe they will find it really, really useful, especially if they choose Gateway for their studies. Я переходжу на українську мову. Перед тим, як у нас почнеться друга частина нашої сьогоднішньої конференції, нагадаю, пані Кароліна наводила приклади і створила гід до курсу Gateway видавництва Macmillan. Ви бачите на екрані, що тут є 7 рівнів, починаючи з рівня A1+, і завершуючи рівнем C1. В кожному підручнику і в кожній книзі для вчителя є унікальний код, який дає доступ до цифрових ресурсів на нашій платформі Macmillan Education Everywhere. Ви зараз на екранах бачите активований код в книзі для вчителя, ви бачите всі ресурси, які доступні вчителеві. Також хочу наголосити, що у кожного учня абсолютно безкоштовно за кодом є робочий зошит онлайн, який автоматично перевіряє всі виконані завдання і надсилає вчителеві вже готові результати. Наша команда підготувала для вас один приємний сюрприз. Зараз ми подивимося тізер цього сюрпризу. На жаль, запланована наживо сесія про онлайн-асесмент виявилася неможливою. Лена, if you can start the video, it would be great. Дивимося тізер.
Welcome to the video in which I'm going to show you how to use Google Forms to create online self-grading tests. Google Forms is, in my opinion, the best application to use in order to create such tests. It is free, very flexible, and allows you to create almost any type of a test or an exercise. It doesn't require any special ICT skills, and the test creation takes a couple of minutes once you have the content, which is the test. It makes it possible to send it to almost any group of students through links or share with collaborators so that other teachers could also add their content to the test you're preparing. In this video, I'm going to take you through the steps of test creation, from the very first step, which is creating a test quiz, to adding questions, modifying them, copying, duplicating if necessary, sending to students, analyzing their responses, and correcting and giving feedback. So let's dive straight into it.
Отже, це був тізер. Кожен учасник другого дня вебінару у листі, який надійде разом із гідом, який підготувала Кароліна, отримає це відео, в якому покроково наш колега з Польщі, пан Лукаш, показує, як дуже просто, використовуючи Google форми, створювати тести, які перевіряються автоматично і результати яких надсилаються вчителеві. Хочу також нагадати, а тим, хто не був з нами вчора, то сказати, до кожного нашого підручника розроблено діагностичний тест, який перевіряється автоматично, а результати надсилаються вчителеві. Знов-таки, на наступному тижні ви отримаєте листа, в якому буде посилання на заявку до підключення до цього тестування. Єдиною умовою доступу до цього тестування є користування підручниками видавництва Macmillan в своїй роботі. І я переходжу до другої частини нашої сьогоднішньої зустрічі. Сподіваюсь, що наш спікер вже з'явився і так, з'явився. Хочу нагадати усім присутнім, що починаючи з 2021 року англійська мова, іноземна мова стає обов'язковим вибором на зовнішньому незалежному оцінюванні. Тобто, якщо ще в цьому році учні обирали між математикою та історією, то наступного року вибір буде стояти між історією і іноземною мовою. І досвід і практика показують, що багато хто обирає англійську мову, поки він не є обов'язковим вибором. Кількість таких учнів обов'язково збільшиться, і ми передбачаємо це. І я із задоволенням представляю нашого другого спікера. I'm switching into English. Today the second session is run by Jacek Lagun. I will Again, a small teaser. We have the second edition of the most popular exam preparation course, Get to 100, and Jacek is one of the authors of this second edition. So, Jacek, I'm really glad to see you today, and the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here. It's really nice that I can talk to you. It's holiday time still in your country, right? Now, you haven't started working, have you? Okay, fine. So I'll tell you this. On the 3rd of January 2020, my wife and I, we bought tickets to Edinburgh. We wanted to visit, this beautiful capital of Scotland. We wanted to spend some time, my wife, my kids and I, just wandering along those beautiful streets, just maybe visiting a distillery to try, this famous Scottish whiskey somewhere there. And, we were so happy. And then 10 weeks later, suddenly, my country was completely closed. I suppose the same thing happened to your country. Suddenly, I couldn't leave my country. And if I had, I wouldn't have been able to come back. The world got totally crazy, suddenly. My classes, my live classes with students at university and my teenage students that I work with, they all went online. I couldn't see my students face to face. And, I started thinking, does it really make sense to plan anything in this world? Does it really make sense, to have any plans involving lesson plans, when, you don't know whether your students are going to turn up, we don't know whether they're going to switch on the cameras. So, this is how it started, my thinking about planning. But then I thought, wait, maybe just because one plan didn't work the way you wanted it to work, maybe it doesn't mean that, you don't have to plan in your life at all. Well, and then I started thinking, what planning brings me and how I can use it in different ways in my classroom, online and hopefully offline when I come back to my students after this terrible pandemic. But before I tell you that, we need to have some rules and regulations introduced to our presentation. Okay, first I have a bit of a question to you. Oh, this is Edinburgh. Do you know this guy? Do you know the name of this gentleman, of the actor? Anybody? Yes, this is Mr. Butler. And as every butler, he will help us with the rules and regulations. So here we go. Our butler will tell us that in this presentation, I want you to be active. I want you to react. I want you to react to jokes. I'm a dad. I have two sons. One is 20 years old. The other one is she's going to be 18 in December. So whenever I tell a joke, you know what the reaction is. It's like, oh, dad jokes, not funny. So you're my only chance for people to laugh when I make a joke. So can you please, whenever I make a joke and I show you this, just in case, if my jokes are not good enough, can you please react, in the chat window, with more or less this. I would see, I can't read. Okay, with this. So I can see that, oh, yeah, you're there, oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. You're so nice. Okay, so Mr. Butler has introduced whatever he wanted to introduce us to. So let's go ahead. The first question: why should we plan our lessons at all? Is there any good reason? Maybe if we're teachers, if we've worked long enough, maybe we don't need to plan. Maybe we just, right, good enough, just going there and improvising, because what's the point of getting ready for anything if we don't know what's coming in the future? Well, I believe there are two very nice practical reasons, and those reasons are because of being professional, and this is what they bring. First of all, if you're planning a lesson, if you think about what's coming, and I'm not saying, like the whole weekend for one lesson. Obviously, we're teachers. We have absolutely no friends. So we can spend, the whole weekend, preparing our classes for our students. But if we don't want to spend that much time, we can plan those lessons really quickly in our heads. So if we start thinking about our lessons, we will think like, what are the goals that we have, And then once you have a goal, you can think about the tools that you want to introduce, the tools that you want to use in your class. Now, there's this interesting, oops, I'm just trying to do something. Okay, there's this interesting thing that, whenever there's a presentation on tools in the classroom, in a lot of situations, you get hammers, a picture of a hammer or a bucket or a spade, but teaching, in most cases, is a very fine job. And the tools we need for teaching, I would say like that, rather than, a hammer, that you're going to use to put knowledge into your students' heads, I suppose. So the first reason is we need to know what we want to achieve. We need to know what our goal is to use the right tools. Now, the next reason is that, when you have a plan, you have some lesson structure, you have a clear structure, and then this gives you and your students safety. Because, whenever you're moving somewhere, you're showing your students, I know this is stage one. They don't even know, sometimes they have in most cases, they have no idea that there's a plan, that there are goals, that there are ideas behind our class. They just come in. But, if they see that we're moving smoothly, if the lesson, goes on from one stage to another, then basically they feel better. And you know what? I also like this thing that, when I come into the classroom and I tell my students, today we're going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. I show them I'm prepared. This is one thing. Another thing is I'm showing them I'm in control. I know this lesson is not like an accidental man in an accidental room with some people there. And one final thing is something very practical. When you tell your students that you have 3 or 4 things to do, and they hear that you're getting to point number 3, they know, oh, the lesson is slowly coming to an end, which means that in a moment we're going to have a break, which makes your students surprisingly more patient in lots of situations. Okay, so this is, that's the idea. So if that's how I believe, I suppose I should give you, the plan of this presentation. So off we go. We're going to talk about PPP, ESA, and TTT. Very easy, clear, and simple, right? No, it isn't. Okay. Today, I'll try to talk to you about 3 different ways of planning a lesson. The first one is present, practice, produce. The other one is engage, study, and activate. And the last one is test, teach, test. A lot of teachers like the last one, but I'll explain that, it's not what lots of teachers think, like, ooh, a lot of tests and nothing else. No, it's not what we're going to. If I'm a little bit too energetic, please understand that, I haven't taught anyone for like almost 2 months now. You are my chance to be back in the classroom. So I appreciate that, I love my job, and now I'm back in the classroom sharing. Okay, so here we go. This is going to be present, practice, produce, engage, study, activate, and test, teach, test. And I will also tell you what the good things about them are. Now, thank you for this listening remark. I'll tell you what the good things, but also what the negative aspects are. Because let's not cheat ourselves. There are no perfect solutions. Whenever you want to choose a tool, you need to take a look at, okay, what do I need that for? What is it going to be better for? Okay, so I'm going to use for the examples, Get to 100 New Edition, which I had the great privilege to be a contributor to. I was asked, and it was a great pleasure to write part of the book. So this is where the examples will come where the examples will come from. So present, practice, and produce. Okay, so if you think about that, this is one of the most common ways of planning a lesson. You know, it's been with us for over like I think 30 years right now in education, and we've heard like, you know, this is the best way to teach, and it's not a bad way to teach. Just like, but there are some pitfalls, there are some traps which we have to be aware of, which we have to understand that, you know, we may make a little bit of a mistake with. If I talked about the good things about this present, practice, produce, where the teacher presents, then the students practice with the exercises that the teacher gives, and then they produce what the teacher asks them to do. You know, the good thing is that we as teachers, we feel in control. You know, we present, we say the things we want to teach. The problem, and that's a really big problem, is that, you know, our students get quite well distracted, you know, unfocused, and you all know what it feels like when you teach your students, you know, online, you know, how easy it is for them to lose focus. You know, you probably have seen, I mean, do your students put the cameras on or not? You know, it's like, if it's, can you please give me a plus if they have the cameras on, or a minus, you know, if they don't have those cameras, you know, on a lot? No? Okay. So yeah, generally I can see that, you know, it seems like quite a number of you, okay, didn't have the problem, but, you know, and quite a number did. You know, lots of students, and basically they don't put the camera on, you know, I know my son, who's in secondary school, he didn't put his camera on, you know, repeatedly, and I asked why not. It's like, because then I can do something else, and I can pretend to be in the class. We know what their reality is. And if we present something valuable, if we're active, right, like I'm active now, and the students don't have a chance, you know, to respond, they don't say, we don't check whether they are there. But basically, in these cases, you know, they tend to, you know, just like to do something else, you know, disappear from the class. So if we want to follow this, if we want to follow this lesson plan where we present, we need to make sure that we get our students involved. Online, but offline as well. You know, probably, you know, you've seen those looks, you know, when you talk to your students. You know, I have seen them definitely when I talk to my students about grammar, for example, for too long. And, you know, and then, you know, I notice those students basically looking out of the window, you know, suddenly for no reason, or, you know, just like starting to talk to someone, or, you know, those looks when they try to reach for the phone, you know, because in some places where I work, students are allowed to have phones, you know, you can see them, they're just like suddenly just looking down, thinking that I can see that. So they get distracted. So I have to find a way to get them involved in the presentation stage. So there are a few ways to do that. And here are my ideas. The first one is a pre-test. And, you know, as you can see, well, this is a pre-test which explains what the pre-test is, and at the same time it presents what's going to happen in a few moments, because that's the idea of a pre-test. You know what you're going to have because you've planned the lesson. You know, you write 3 or 4, maybe 5 most important things, you know, on the question, on the piece of paper, or Google Forms, or wherever you want to do that. You know, you write this test, and you give it to your students. But the thing is, you don't mark them for that because, well, they don't know. You know, you probably don't know how you could use little yellow pieces of paper to help your students focus, because I haven't talked about that yet. But this way, I'm telling my students, okay, these are the most important things in my presentation, in my class, you know, when I talk to you. And I want you to have the answers to them. So, you know, it helps your students focus. This is one thing. Another thing is that, you know, in a way, you get them involved, you get them in like curious. Who? So we're going to learn a few things. What's Socrative? Is it secretive? You know, so basically, this is how it works. So, you know, you have a bit of a pre-test, you know, and that's what we're doing right now. You know, I'd like you to think for a moment. You know what a pre-test is. You know, how can you, or how can a little piece of paper help your students focus? Just think. And where can you put these pieces of paper? And what's Socrative? Okay, so basically now you have those questions in your hands. And now when I present, I know that I hope most of you will be waiting for the answers to arrive. So, okay. So you know what a pretest is. You can give your students a pretest, and then, you know, when I come back, Socrative is cool, I agree. You know, when I come back at the end, you will see how you can use this pretest for something else. Now, this is an example of a pretest, you know, just to show you how we can work with grammar. Again, you just leave this to your students. No, because when you work with a book like Get to 100, you know, this kind of book, we have a lot of good revision. You know, the thing is that sometimes you need to go over, for example, the grammar before you start. But you can't spend a lot of time, because your students won't listen. And so, basically you just introduce the most important points with the pretest. Then you talk very quickly, very briefly. You present things briefly with the pretest. And then you work with the grammar, and your students find the answers to the pretest themselves. And at the end of the class, you can check it with them or not. Okay, but this is the idea. All right, it's very basic, easy questions. But again, those questions might be concerned with the most important points in your presentation, and there can't be too many. And because if you give your student a test like with 10 questions, they will read the first 4, and then they will stop reading. Okay, so okay, fine. I'll answer those little pieces of paper. This is what they are sticky post-it notes. I hope you can see here in the picture. Now, how can you use them? Well, you can't really use them in online teaching, but you can use them in your offline teaching in the classroom. So what you do before the class, you write the most important questions, maybe words you want your students to remember, maybe a piece of information, and write them on a piece of paper, and you put them underneath your students' chairs or desks. And when they come in, they never notice that. They just sit down. And then when you before you start presenting, you tell them, now, some of you, or all of you, it depends on your decision, have little pieces of paper underneath your chairs. And these pieces of paper will check or have questions about what I'm going to talk about now. Okay? So your students now have, ooh, so, maybe under my chair, there's a question about what the teacher is going to ask me. About a word, maybe as grammar structure, so you hide that. And then, when you do that, I suppose maybe not all students, because not always all students are kind of involved in the class, but most students will be kind of, I have it somewhere here, I'll have to listen to everything, to get the answer right. If you want to go, with a kind of a little bit of a trick, you can tell them, what, there are 4 questions, and there are, let's say, 20 students, 25 students in the class. So when I start the countdown after my presentation, you will have to get the question. 6 of you will have the same question. Whoever answers first gets, I don't know, high five, a smile. No, maybe no high five. We can't touch each other right now, but a smile or a whatever you want to give your students, or a good mark. Okay. But the point is, this is how we work. You tell your students, listen to me. It's somewhere there. You just be careful, because you don't know when you're going to hear the piece of information. Okay, and then this one final point, that is, okay, what's Socrative? Okay, so as I could see, some of you know Socrative. That's like an online service which you can use for your students to follow, or for testing. It's a wonderful online tool which you can use either when with your students online, or you can use it with your students, well, if they have access to mobile phones, or if they have access to, I don't know, some kind of iPads, whatever, in the class. You can use it even in the classroom at the same time. So how does it work? I wanted to do that with you. I wanted to show you how it works, but, for technical reasons, the free version allows the teacher to use only 50, work with only 50 students. There are definitely more than 50 students here right now in this classroom, so I couldn't do it, but I'll show you. Okay, so the first thing is, this is an app which, gives you instant feedback. You as a teacher, for example, my room is Jacek 3344. This is my room is. As a teacher, before the class, I prepare a short test, and my students, I launch it. I launch it during before the class, or when I start talking, and then I tell my students, now you can log in. And when they log in, they go to Socrative, and this website, they find student login, and it's always free for the student. They never have to pay for that. That's why I like it. You don't have to pay for it, anything. They launch it, and they write the room name. So, like, if they want to take my test, they have to write Jacek 3344. And that's what they do. And after that, they join. And then, depending on the settings of what I've left for them, they get different kinds of tests. You can take a look, and you can decide which settings you prefer. But this is for what test for get to 100, page 46 looks like. It says the present perfect is often used with the word ago, and when I give my presentation, my students listen, and when I get to this point about the present perfect, they just choose the answer. When they hear it, they don't hear it, they guess, and they give the answer. And if they give the correct answer, this is what the information is. The perfect, like they say, it's false, and it's like, great, you gave me the correct answer, which was, well, it's false because obviously you used the past simple with ago. And this is what your students see, but it's it's a wonderful thing what you can see as the teacher. Because I'm still logged in, and this is, as you can see, planning a lesson presentation. And, there are different student names. In a moment, I'm going to have something for you with that. And, and they start giving answers. And when I can see that I got to point number 1, and half of them gave the correct answer, and half of them gave the incorrect answer, basically I can see, oh, wow, well, I need to explain that more clearly. And if half of them, if everybody gets the correct answer, this means, okay, well, they got that. We can move on. So I can see in real life whether they are listening or not. That's a very good idea, because sometimes you can see that somebody's missing, because they haven't answered the last 3 questions. So this is how you work with them. You tell them, okay, where are you? It's like, hello, where are you, John, or whoever, Oleg, I want you to answer the questions. Okay, so you can see when they are active. And just because I've been talking, yeah, okay, good. I wanted to say, as you can see, there are very different names of students. So I wanted to have a little bit of a competition for you. Can you make one correct sentence with the words you can see in the name column? So I'll give you a moment. You take a look, and can you please write one correct English sentence? Oh, come on, write that. It will make me feel much better about myself. Please. Yes, Jacek is very handsome. I'll have a screenshot. I'll show my wife. I hope she knows that without that, but still. Okay, so thank you very much for boosting my self-confidence and making me feel a little bit better. That was a nice moment for me. So, well, Jacek is, I would say, slightly handsome, it's not very, but just I just wanted to feel a bit better about myself. But basically the idea is that you will have your student's name instead of handsome is Jacek and very, right? They will have to write that. So this is how you keep your students focused on your presentation. This is how they have to take a look at what's happening and how things are going on, right? And then you move on, with the class. Now, what's next? We have this present stage, and then we have the practice stage. And I believe, that, the older I get, the more experience I get. I believe that students actually need to be led slowly from easier to more difficult. I remember being a young teacher and giving my students really difficult exercises right after I've explained something. And I was totally surprised that they couldn't get it. It's like, how can't you? It's like, it's so easy. It's so obvious. I've just explained it like, students don't know as much as we do. They don't have as much experience as we do. So whenever we work with them, we have to move progressively, slowly, one by one. So we start with a very simple exercise, in which you have the answers, some of the answers to the pretest, for example, and things you've explained. Then you move to something more complex, so once your students are, let's say, they don't have to make this decision making is quite easy for them, or, they are primed, already for talking about the present perfect or revising the present perfect. Then you give them something more complicated, something where they have to probably discuss things or talk to each other. And then you have to move to something, questions, I'll hide them. So you'll have to move to something which I think is still a drill, is still some kind of repetition of a structure, again and again and again, the same structure, but at the same time is interesting and communicative. And there are different kinds of exercises. One of the exercises is something that I call yes questions. The yes questions are, it's like it's a wonderful universal exercise because you can basically use it with any grammar structure you want to. So you tell your students using the structure, as you can see, this is the present perfect, using the structure now, I want you to ask me, the teacher, 5 questions, and I have to say yes to all of them. If you do that, you get, again, a smile, whatever, from me. And you know what, as students know quite a lot about us, because basically, I mean, I don't know about you, but I talk about my life all the time. They know so much about my life, they're always ready to prepare those questions. So, I give my students the question and they will ask me questions and I say yes, generally to all of them. So, we have the same structure repeated. So that's a drill. But at the same time, it's communicative because it's fun, because you ask questions about your teacher. And now, there's the slide I've already shown you. These are 5 yes questions about myself. Okay, actually 4 yes questions about myself. I would say no to one of these. And now, in the chat box, can you please give me the number of the question you think I would say no to? Okay, so the one I haven't done yet. I'm just checking the answers and having a cup of coffee. Okay. Nice. Well, just quite a few got it right. Okay, I'll tell you. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I tell you. Okay, yeah, I will tell you. Okay, well, actually, it's number 4. Okay. Yeah, I can see your surprised faces right now. I had good reasons to sleep at a cemetery and to wear a dress. Well, I cry when I watch films quite often, and yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. Is it Lindsay?
Mlynці.
Lindsay. Okay, Lindsay. Thank you very much, Lindsay. I have it in these because they are kind of like something we eat a lot in my family. We have close links to like eastern border of our country, so we have lots of the same food as people from Ukraine and Lithuania and Belarus. So basically, yeah, I have tried these. Okay, maybe one day when I meet you in person, I can explain your questions about why a cemetery or a dress. Okay, but that's just an example of Lindsay. Okay, thank you. So that's an example of of an activity which is a drill, which is practice stage in your class, and at the same time it's communicative, and it takes your students closer and closer to being communicative. And now we have a produce stage. And now another thing that I like about the produce stage is the thing that we don't have to expect our students to produce enormous numbers of sentences, to produce something very deep. The thing is that production can be something like that. Why are you so sad? Because of this and that. And this is also production. And this is actually the production we want from our students at B1 level. They will talk more one day, they will learn more. But this is, at this point, we want them to produce something on their own. So that was this present, practice, and produce part. So once again, just very quickly, when we present, we are in control. We're happy as teachers, but our students tend to lose focus. So we need to help them focus on what we're talking about. When we practice, we have to go from something which is easy and manageable to those exercises which are more and more difficult. And finally, we want our students to produce. We don't always have to expect our students to have presentations or, to talk about something, to give us, deep opinions about some difficult problems, because it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it does, but doesn't always work like that. So the next lesson kind of plan I would like to suggest and talked about is like engage, study, activate. The ESSA plan, which I prefer and which I use more often than PPP in my classes. Because this one is focused on the student, because you engage your student in the class. You study, well, you don't study, they study, your students study, students study, they take a look at what you want them to learn. Grammar, but not necessarily, as I will show you in a moment. And then finally, you activate the knowledge in them, which is a little bit like asking them to produce. But again, the beginning, the engagement, and the study are much better, in my opinion, in lots of situations, not always, than this present and practice stage. Okay, so how can you engage your students? Again, what I like about teaching is that, you know, that you don't have to be under the curse of creativity to have a good class. You know, to engage your students in a lesson which is on food, like, for example, you know, I'm going to show you, you know, you can start with like a simple question. Are you hungry? By the way, people, are you hungry? You've been listening for quite some time, but you're at home, so we can get something to eat right on the way. Anybody who's hungry? No. Good. Great. You know, if you get the question, are you hungry now? And your students say no, which is, well, let's tell the truth. It's not possible. They are teenagers. They're always hungry. You know, with my kids, it's just like you put some food on the table, you turn around, you look back, it's gone. You know, so teenagers are always hungry. But, you know, are you hungry now? This is a nice beginning, you know, of a conversation about food. Or, you know, you can ask them questions like, what have you eaten? What have you eaten today? And have you eaten borscht? I think this is the right word for that. This week, you know, and you know, just this is how you get involved. So the first way to get your students engaged is like, you know, come with the right mindset to the class. You know, you've planned, you've prepared, and you know, you just look at that and you tell your students, okay, have you ever done this? Do you like that? You know, this is what happened to me. Has that happened to you? Okay, so that's the kind of idea that, you know, you can have with your students. This is actually what I tried to do with you at the beginning of this presentation. I talked to you about my holidays, and we're in the middle of the holidays, and I talked to you about my holiday plans, and I suppose lots of you had holiday plans, and I told you how they didn't work out. And I'm afraid, and I'm sorry, but a lot of you have been in this situation this year, right? So this is how we get. Oh, the girls eat a lot too. Yeah, true. I have sons. Okay, so this is how it works. You know, a simple question makes people interested. But you know, you can't just come in and say, you know, you call the register and then say, today we'll talk about the present perfect. No, you start with a question, which will lead to the present perfect, or talking about food. You can start with a bit of a challenge. You know, what I like about challenges is, you know, with teenagers is that, you know, that they or challenge, but let's say just like with a bit of a puzzle, you know, puzzles and challenges, you know, they get them involved, you know, they like, you know, playing, they like answering questions. They know how many calories are there in a typical English breakfast, you know, that's an interesting question. How many do you think? You know, you can write the answers, you know, and this is what you're going to talk about, you know, because in this class you have a typical full English breakfast. Yeah, a lot. What about a number? You know, so the thing is, wow, somebody was really close. You know, different websites talk about 800 calories, about 800 calories. See, but you know, 800 calories, cool, Victoria. Okay, so this is wonderful. You know, this is just, you give them a question. This is how you start. You know, how you get them engaged. Or, you know, you can go with like a bit of a challenge, as I said, you know. So you give them those words. These are all the words from the class on food and comparing, you know, Ukrainian and British food. And you tell them, okay, compose a menu, use these dishes. You can say, okay, now compose a menu for a 3-course menu for a dinner when you want to take someone on a date, or dinner when you want to spend some time with your friends, or dinner for Christmas. Probably not, you know, not enough food for Christmas, but you know, compose a menu. Or you can give them like a calorie limit, or you can tell them, you know, you can't spend more than, and then you give them how much money. But this is how you start. You know, you get your students engaged. Then they can vote, for example, for like the best menu that they've created. But you don't give them a lot of time, just a few minutes. You know, just to get what's your favorite food? That was a bad question. Now I'll stop talking about planning a lesson. Okay, I love chicken tikka masala. I love borscht. Holodiec is the kind of soup, like cold soup made of beetroot, I suppose. So that's definitely my favorite. Okay, my family used to say we make it all the time, so I love it. I think this one. So you know, this is how we get involved. You know, we start talking about that, and then you can move on to the class, and then you can move on to something which, in this case, in this this food and this introduction is taken from a lesson I wrote to prepare the students for a listening exercise, you know, to start and learn. So you engage your students, you spend some time, you know, you ask them those questions, you know, you have like the decision, Ukrainian, British, would you like to try, you know, do you know what they taste like? and then you give them the listening. Sorry, before you give them the listening, you ask them to work with true-false questions. So it's all about engaging your students. Why is it so important? Well, because, you know, the most important thing in the class is studying, and you know, to get your student to study, you have to study. You have to make your students focus on what's happening. You have to make sure that your student is in the class. I mean, when you start a lesson on food, you know, they may start thinking about food outside, but generally they probably focus. So when they are there with you, talking, discussing, you know, you have this wonderful, brilliant moment when you tell them, okay, we've done this, you know, now take a look at this Get Smarter part. And they read a little bit of a comment which says something like, you know, whenever you have words like only, never, something, you have to be very careful with that. Okay, so, you know, we have this engage stage. Now we have the study stage, which is always very brief because students can focus. You know that, and I know that, and we know that they won't focus for a long time, especially online. You know, when they work online. So that's the idea. And after that, you give them a listening, but you know, the kind of listening where they can actually activate the knowledge they got from you. You know, so. If you take a look at those questions, you will see that in question 2, there was this word only. Then in question 4, you have the word always. And there's one more, I think, somewhere that. See, my glasses, I have to change my glasses. And we have the word never, but here the word never is not used, but we have isn't, right? Or doesn't. So, you know, the thing is, with this, you're giving your students a chance to activate while practicing for the exam. You know, you're practicing for the exam, but at the same time, you're activating the knowledge you've just given them. So again, engage a lot of time, study briefly, and activate in lots of different ways. Another way of keeping your students interested, because, you know, the point is, we as teachers have to focus on giving our students a chance to be interested, you know, so that they don't lose focus, so that they don't kind of like start thinking about something else. So when you want to activate vocabulary, you know, you need to go with the right questions, you know, when thinking about time. Now, if you take a look at exercise 3.3 here, tell me about an important year in your life. Imagine asking your students the question when you see them this year, online, offline, doesn't matter. They will tell you about this year. You will use the present perfect, by the way. You'll have to tell them, remember, we're talking about 2020, which is not over, so this is the present perfect. And at the same time, they will talk about an important year in there because, well, this is an important year, you know, for me. And I'm, you know, I'm over 40. This is one of the, if not the weirdest year I've lived through. You know, so for my students who are 18, this is definitely the weirdest and the strangest and the most important year in their lives. You know, so basically, this is how you get them involved, by personalizing. This is another thing, personalizing the kind of vocabulary they have. Now, another thing you can have or you can do with the students is, you know, asking them to prepare speaking and writing. Again, sometimes I think, not very often, but sometimes as teachers, we might have slightly, well, let's say, unrealistic expectations. And we sometimes think that, you know, our students will just talk about everything right away. If you give them a chance to write, to take notes, to prepare, and then start talking, you know, using the notes, there's a big chance that they will produce something that is a little bit better, a little bit, you know, kind of prepared. Now, one thing that I like to do with my students from time to time, it's not something that I do in every class because it takes a lot of effort on my students' part and it takes a lot of effort on my part, you know, and I don't think I have enough time to do it in every class, and I don't think that would get boring. But yes, these are phrasal verbs. But the thing is that, you know, I ask my students sometimes to do the following thing. I give them a topic, online, offline, different situations, and then I tell them, okay, now you have a few minutes to write down some, you know, some points, prepare, make a plan. Plans are good. Make a plan, and then you record either a short speech on your mobile or a dialogue, again, using mobiles. But that's not everything. You know, I don't get those dialogues recorded. And then I tell my students, now I'd like you to write down everything you've just said. So make a script of what you've done. And I have a little bit of a surprise for you. In a moment, I'll show you a video of a student of mine who prepared such a video. This is from online classes. I gave him a task to prepare about 1 minute long, strange, spooky, scary story. You know, we had like vocabulary to do with the scary and unusual things, and we had modal verbs. So I told my students, now prepare a minute-long speech. In your speech, you have to use modal verbs 4 times, different ways. And after that, you know, well, yes, okay. Thank you very much. You know, now you can hear me. Thank you. Wonderful audience. So yes, the thing is that once again, so as you can see, you know, you would be surprised, you know, if you looked at Radek in his class, in my class, you know, because he's always serious. He never kind of does anything strange. He basically sits in one place. So when I saw the video, I was surprised. I told him, Radek, there's life in you. You know, you answer like, you know what? Because sometimes I'm so bored at home, then it's so much fun to do something cool, you know, and record something, you know, so thank you for giving us this task. So no, he recorded that, and then the next thing was, you know, he sent me this. As you can see, the comments are in Polish because this is the actual thing, you know, like I sent this to him and he sent this back to me. So, you know, I left some comments, some in Polish, some in English. I told him like, you know, maybe that's you know, the comment J3 is like that, you know, you use the modal here, but it's you know, it's not used correctly. This is what it sounds like. And I also, you know, those here, the pink ones, the purple ones, the violet ones, you know, I underlined words which were not wrong, but I told my student, I told Radek and all my students, you know, these are the things you could change into something more complex. You know, you're B2 level students, you can find a synonym for that, which in my way is like, you know, making the speeches more complex on the one hand. On the other hand, you know, learning synonyms and in context, you know, in the right situation. So this is what I did with them. And, you know, Radek recorded that again. I'm not going to play this to you, but this is what I did. And, you know, and I asked him to send me another version. So he did, you know, he did send me. And he corrected most of the mistakes, not all of them. You know, he changed some of the words, again, not all of them, but he learned a lot, you know, from that. And, you know, we did that for, I think, about 2 weeks. So it was like, you know, I asked them to do that. They had some time to prepare it. They sent this with the script. I looked at the script. I sent it back, you know. So it was like back and forth, which was not in the classroom. You know, it was outside the classroom. It wasn't in the classes, you know. I sent emails to all the students in the class. So it is a lot of work. But if you take a look at that, you know, he was involved and his knowledge from the class was activated several times, not just once. How did I get the script of his speech? I told him to do that. So he recorded himself and then he wrote the speech down. So he had to do it. He had to send it to me, right? So this is nice. I don't do it. You know, he sends that. My students send that to me, which is good for them because they focus, they take a look, they think, you know, they see like, you know, even when they write this down, they say like, oh, I made a mistake. That's a funny thing. Sometimes I got a recording with the mistake and the script without a mistake, which was like when they were writing, they said like, nah, I have to correct it. Okay, so you know, there's lots of reflection on their own teaching. Okay, on their own learning. So you know, this is just an idea for you. So engage, study, and activate. You know, what I like about engage, study, and activate is that this is student-centered. That students get involved. That they study. That they get activated. What's a little bit tricky about engage, study, and activate for a lot of teachers, sometimes even for me, and you know, I suppose not even for me too, is the fact that when they get engaged and when they study, you know, I have to understand that they will make mistakes. I have to understand that they won't hear the exact correct version the first time, that they will discuss things, that they will disagree, that it may take time before they get to something right. But again, you know, the idea is just like being involved in the process. Okay, and test, teach, test. Don't worry. It's very brief. Remember how I told you that, when you know what the plan for the class is, and when you hear that, part 3 is coming, you know that everything is closer and closer. Well, you know that my class, my presentation is PPP, ESA, and TTT. So you know that you don't have to suffer for much longer. It's only one part, and this one is going to be quite brief. Okay, so how does test, teach, test work? Okay, the thing is that with test, teach, test, what you do is, you prepare a test like a pre-test I showed you at the very beginning of the class. Then you teach. You can use present, practice, produce, or engage, study, activate, or any other lesson plan. And then at the end of the class, you give your students the same test and you test them again. And with the first test, we want to achieve something different. And the second test, we want to achieve something different. The first one is to show your students what the important part of the class is. Because when they come to the classroom, the only reason they are there is because they have to be there. And they don't know that lesson has a plan, there are goals, that they have to learn something. And, if we come in and we show them with a brief test, and by the way, don't mark those tests. This is just a very simple, basic test. I'll show you a few ideas in a moment, for your students to see, okay, this is the important part. Okay, this is what you want me to learn. This is what you expect from me. Okay, fine. This is what I will focus on. And then you teach, you have a class. And at the end, you give your students the same test. You show them, well, you've learned something. You've achieved something. You've paid attention. And if you haven't, here's a revision. We have a test. We take a look at that. If you really need to give marks, you can give marks for the second test. But there's no need for that, because then when you start giving marks, your students will stop thinking about learning and they will start focusing on, just getting a good mark. And that's not what we really want from our students. Okay, so this is an idea how you can test. Apart from, you can use the Socrative if you wish, the Socrative website. You can use Google Forms. I think that, this, the presentation you're going to get from Łukasz is going to be brilliant for that, because he will show you how to prepare tests, and you will learn from him. Wonderful guy, by the way, I love spending time with him, talking to him. Really cool person. So the thing is that, you can ask your students to do this. I talked about that in one of my previous online presentations, but I'll just go over this briefly just to remind you and to show those of you who haven't had the chance to see that yet. So basically, you tell your students, at the beginning of the class, that to test each other this way. They take a look at the vocabulary from the class, the vocabulary that's important, and they write this in Ukrainian. And they also they make the same kind of like a grid for student B. And then they ask each other the vocabulary. And if the other student knows the word, you just write down the English version. And if they don't know, you write your native Ukrainian version of the word. And you leave this other piece of paper for the end of the class. And in the class, you learn, you practice the vocabulary, you work with whatever you want to work with. And then, the teacher says, okay, now it's test time, the second test time. And they just get the piece of paper with those words your students didn't know, and they test each other again. But they only test on the words that, we knew or were not known to the other students at the beginning of the class. So again, you don't have to prepare anything. You tell your students, make a grid in your notebook, take a look at these words, or pick 20 words from this class, test each other very quickly at the beginning, then you have the class, and at the end, test each other again. Hopefully, or generally, they will have a much better result. So again, you can use that in the class with this. You can use that using Socrative, using Google Forms, and a few other kind of online devices, so you can work with your students further on, right? This is how it works. So I talked to you today about 3 different kinds of lesson plans. I talked to you about present, practice, produce lesson plan, engage, study, activate, and I talked to you about test, teach, test approach to a class. Whenever you want to achieve something, you think what you want to achieve and you use the right plan. If you want to explain something or revise something very briefly, you may go with PPP. Then you introduce something to your students, they practice, and then they produce. If you want your students to focus on something, you want them to learn, you want them to study something, then you go with engage, study, and activate. You engage your students, and this is, by the way, how I tried to write most of the material for for Get to 100, you know, like with engaging, studying, and activating your students. You know, so engage, study, and activate. So you just engage, study, and then you activate the knowledge. And you can keep your students focused using this test, teach, test approach. You know, when you test without marks, then you teach, and then you test your students again. Do you know what? Coming back to the beginning of my presentation. So yeah, I didn't go to Edinburgh, you know, I actually spent most of my holiday in my hometown. By the way, it's like having a holiday all the time because I live in a beautiful city, actually town. It's called Olsztyn. There are 11 lakes in my town. There are mountains, there are forests, and you know, I'm a very active person, so I love being here. But I didn't go to Edinburgh, and you might think, well, was it really worth planning? I think it was worth planning because, you know, I still have this plan. Maybe I didn't, you know, manage to make it come true this year. And just like with the class, sometimes you plan something and well, it doesn't work out. It happens. But I will be able to, well, make it come true maybe next year or in 2 years. So you know what? If I have a chance to meet you next year, I hope maybe one day I'll be able to visit you in person. Then you can ask me whether I liked Edinburgh. And then I will tell you how it went. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Really, thank you. I would like to focus the attention of the participants on what is new. Я переходжу на українську мову. Як я сказала на самому початку, у нас вийшло нове видання підручника Get to 100. Частину матеріалу до цього видання написав, створив саме пан Яцек, за що ми йому безмежно вдячні. Отже, що нового в другому виданні порівняно з першим? Трошечки історії. Перед тим, як створювати друге видання, наша команда провела опитування, де ми просили вчителів, які користуються підручником Get to 100, поділитися своїми ідеями, що їм подобається, що варто зберегти у другому виданні, а що варто було б змінити. І одне з прохань від вчителів було, щоб граматика була у кожному розділі. І ми це зробили. Тепер граматика у контексті є у кожному розділі. На кожний юніт є до 12 вправ граматичних, включаючи такі вправи, як ви бачите зараз на екрані, на написання листів та есе. Крім того, після кожного розділу, після ворд-листів, які дуже подобаються вчителям та учням, є завдання на повторення. І ви бачите зараз на екрані ці завдання на повторення у екзаменаційному форматі. Третя річ, яку було зроблено, ви знаєте, що минулого року трошечки змінилась програма зовнішнього незалежного оцінювання, і у другому виданні всі завдання без винятку приведені у відповідність до цих змін у програмі. Ви бачите, що там, де написання листів, вже є write at least 150 words для рівня B1, at least 180 words для рівня B2. Повністю новий зміст 8-го розділу Ukraine and the World. Цей розділ написав, власне, Яцек Лагун. Цей розділ реалізує українознавчий компонент програми, тобто все те, що є в шкільній програмі і в програмі ЗНО, яке стосується України, все це відображено у цьому розділі у різних активностях. Ще одна річ, яка з'являється у другому виданні, це Smart Keys в книзі для вчителя. Що це таке? Це детальні пояснення, тобто не тільки відповіді, правильні відповіді, а ще й детальні пояснення, чому саме ця відповідь є правильною, а інші відповіді не є правильними. І розуміючи, яке питання будуть нам ставити, хочу одразу сказати, в другому виданні Teacher's Notes будуть продаватися. І ще одна річ нова, яка з'являється у другому виданні, це нові ресурси. На сайті macmillanyukraine.com створено 2 ресурсних центри. Зараз, сьогодні ви їх побачити не можете, вони будуть активними починаючи з 1 вересня. Це ресурсний центр учня і ресурсний центр вчителя, і зараз одним оком зазирнемо, що там буде усередині у учня та у вчителя. Отже, у учня в ресурсному центрі будуть доступні Use of English Worksheets, це вправи для домашнього завдання, для додаткового опрацювання лексики і граматики і підготовки до частини використання мови в ЗНО. Це методичка з підготовки до зовнішнього незалежного оцінювання, в якій ми зібрали всі поради, інформацію про типи завдань, критерії оцінювання, стратегії щодо виконання кожного типу екзаменаційного завдання, приклади на кожен юніт підручника Get 200, додаткових завдань частини письмо. Аудіофайли у форматі MP3 і ще одна річ, яка з'являється у другому виданні, це Quizlet. Сподіваюсь, ви знаєте, що Quizlet – це дуже популярний безкоштовний додаток. Він працює як на мобільних пристроях, так і на комп'ютерах. Потрібно лише зареєструватися, ввести код, який знаходиться на внутрішній обкладинці підручника, і ваші учні без вашої допомоги можуть самостійно вивчати лексику, відпрацьовувати її, а потім ще й тестувати. А вам, якщо ви об'єднаєте своїх учнів у віртуальний клас в цьому додатку, ще й будуть надходити результати їхньої роботи. Додаток дуже цікавий, дуже зручний і дуже корисний саме для запам'ятовування лексики. Це величезна допомога. Все є, все готово, у учнів є код. У ресурсному центрі вчителя вчитель знайде ті самі Use of English Worksheets, але вже з відповідями, ту саму методичку з підготовки до ЗНО, MP3-файли, всі аудіо до підручника і також тести. 50 тестів на кожну книгу, тести рівня B1 та B2, і тест кожного рівня представлений у двох варіантах, варіант А і варіант Б. І це також ще не все. Немає значення, чи ви використовуватимете в цьому навчальному році перше видання Get 200 або друге видання. Яке б видання ви не використовували, вашим учням буде доступне діагностичне тестування онлайн перед початком Book 1 і перед початком Book 2. І також у березні місяці вашим учням буде доступне онлайн-тестування у форматі ЗНО. Вчора я про це трошечки згадувала. Ми в цьому році, зважаючи на стихійний перехід в онлайн-режим, відкрили цей тест для всіх охочих, проте це тестування доступно виключно тим учням, які навчаються за підручниками нашого видавництва. І отже, якщо у ваших учнів в цьому навчальному році буде підручник Get 200, в них також буде можливість пройти пробне тестування у форматі ЗНО з автоматичною перевіркою. Я хочу нагадати, що кожному учаснику дня номер 2 нашої конференції надійде відео «Online Assessment with Google Forms», яке для вас створив і записав пан Лукаш Олесяк. Це відео надзвичайно корисне буде всім вчителям, воно покроково вам показує і дуже сильно полегшує саме онлайн-асесмент. Також нагадаю, що кожен учасник сьогоднішнього дня отримає хендаут від Кароліни, і пан Яцек також підготував для вас хендаут, і ось все це надійде вам у листі разом із посиланням на запис сьогоднішнього вебінару і разом із сертифікатом. Хочу зазначити, що цей лист надійде до кінця наступного тижня, тобто це не відбудеться сьогодні, навіть не відбудеться завтра, але до кінця наступного тижня ви обов'язково отримаєте від мене лист з всім тим, про що я зараз сказала. Я хочу нагадати, що команда Macmillan Education Ukraine має комплексне рішення для вас і ваших учнів, для того, щоб неважливо в якому форматі ми будемо навчатися в цьому році, у нас є все готово, потрібно лише бажання працювати за нашими підручниками. Це, нагадаю, діагностичні роботи на початку року, це матеріали для заповнення прогалин у знаннях, це матеріали для того, щоб допомогти учням бути більш незалежними у своєму навчанні, і це підтримка методистів видавництва, повна підтримка вас як вчителів, ваших учнів, їхніх батьків і ваших шкіл. Нагадаю, що на нашому сайті є розділ «Дистанційне навчання», де є безкоштовні ресурси, якими ви можете скористатися. Дякую вам величезно за те, що були сьогодні з нами, за те, що були вчора з нами, за вашу працю. Команда Macmillan Ukraine бажає вам натхнення, сил, гарного початку навчального року. Бувайте здорові, до зустрічі онлайн і офлайн.